Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Jeremiah has a lot to talk about today, so for any of you who aren't familiar with him, Jeremiah is a senior analyst at Forrester Research, and he focuses on social computing for the interactive marketer. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to pass things along to Jeremiah.
Hey, thanks a lot. Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk about communities today. But what's interesting is communities aren't anything new. We're all part of many different types of communities in our work life, our personal life, our family life, or even our real neighborhood. But when it comes to marketing, I get asked questions all the time. How do we launch our own community or join a community that exists or use Facebook or MySpace? People just don't know where to start. So I'd like to thank Awareness for working with Forrester so we could do this webinar today. And we're going to talk about social media marketing, so using these types of tools as an effective way to engage your customers and stimulate your prospects. So I'm focused on social media for the interactive marketer at Forrester. In my primary coverage areas, I focus on online communities, social networks, and widgets that enable really fast content to be spread around different types of websites. So let's get started. So right off the bat, I just want you to know a little bit about my background. At Hitachi Data Systems from 2005 to 2007, I was the online community manager. So I've been through some of this, but research is an interesting thing. I get to interview the people that are doing it and have done it way better than I have as part of these findings. So you're going to see the top findings based upon research from multiple reports. Now, communities are a powerful tool, but the key is you have to put their needs before you put your brand's needs. Now, it doesn't make any sense to a CMO, but in reality, those needs, the business needs and your community needs, should be aligned. But in order to be successful, you need to first understand what is it that they need. So here's today's agenda. Here's what we're going to go through. Putting business goals first. So we'll talk about technographics as well, which is about the members' needs, and defining and measuring an objective based for your community efforts. We'll talk about getting your company ready. This is actually a major process change. It's something that changes many different groups within your company, from marketing also to product development, to product support, and even management. Next, we'll talk about creating a social media marketing strategy, optimizing it, tracking, and measuring it. Then we'll take a look at some best practices as well as a case study from what Microsoft has done a few years ago that still resonates in my mind as a really interesting practice. So let's get into it. First of all, let's start with the definition. And this was a definition done in my online community best practices report. And essentially, what I was able to do is get the definition from the community itself. So actually, I'm seeing that some people, their audio just went dead. I'm hoping that you can still hear me. If you can still hear me, just say you can hear me in the chat below. So in online community, what we did is we vetted this actual definition with people using blogs and Twitter. So I actually used some of the social media for this particular definition. And we defined it as an online community is an interactive group of people joined together by a common interest. A couple of examples of how this works. A discussion forum where conversations develop, a custom application with profiles and connections, a group with an existing social networking site or email service, a bunch of blogs together, or even just comments or ratings within a rating site. So the thing is, communities exist everywhere. You don't just have to use social networking tools to make this happen. So let's start with some data. This was a survey done in 2008, Q1, looking at B2B online social computing survey. So what we found, and you can see in the yellow text, is these are social media tools. Towards the top of the chart, you can see what is called traditional marketing tools, such as email newsletters, microsites, video marketing. Folks are very experienced with these things, and you can see in the light blue that they're already using these tools. Now, in the darker blue, you can see what companies are actually piloting with these tools, and online communities represent 28% of they're using it, and another 15% are starting to experiment with it. Same thing with social networks. 25% and then 17%. So essentially, about a quarter of B2B marketers, I don't have B2C in this particular time, are using these tools, and another about 2/3 of that group are starting to experiment with these tools. So this is still very nascent when it comes to a formal marketing plan, but we're starting to see this grow and grow as that dark blue line grows. So ideally, many brands want to have this type of growth curve. This is an S curve. When you can take a look at the conception of a community in the start, the adolescence, and then the maturity as it continues to grow. Now, ideally, this is the model you want to follow, but most companies will not be able to achieve this, primarily because they forget who is in charge. And this goes back to the point of the people within your community are the folks that you want to really focus on. Now, the trick is here, the control is in the hands of the participants, and when I've seen a couple brands that have tried to really lead this conversation without thinking about what is the needs of the community by developing this particular type of content that they need, you'll have unpredictable results. So to be successful, marketers must relinquish control or end up risking with an empty community or even brand backlash. So where do you start when it comes to being successful here? Well, we actually have a methodology how to get started. Forrester focuses on the POST methodology, and many of you have heard this before, but it's important that we reiterate exactly what is it. So the POST is an acronym which stands for P for people. Understand your customers' behaviors. How do they use social technologies? It's important you understand what types of technologies they use before you decide which type of tool that you choose. The second one is develop an objective. What is your business objective? What are you trying to accomplish? It's so often when I talk to clients and they say, we want to have a blog. And I ask why, and they say, because our CEO said so. Well, why does he want one? Well, because our competitors have one. So that's not exactly following the POST methodology. It's looking at it backwards. The next thing you have to develop is a strategy. What exactly are the resources that you need in order to accomplish this? And how is it going to change your relationships with your customers? And then finally, then you pick the tools, the technologies, the features, the gadgets, the doodads, and the widgets in order to achieve these goals. Remember, this is the POST method, not to stop. That's backwards, and that's not even a real word. So let's talk about 5 objectives. So we're talking about the P, now the O. Consider one objective to start with when it comes to your community. Really master that, and then layer on additional ones. So at the high level, listening is listening to a community, whether it be in Facebook or you build your own community that's rebranded, understanding exactly what is it that they need and what they want. The next one is called talking. So that means talking with your customers in their community to spread marketing messages or talk about what exactly is it that your company is offering or your latest product. The third one, called energizing, is also known as word-of-mouth marketing. And this is very powerful and common to do within existing social networks like Facebook or MySpace or Bebo, where these tools are designed for content to quickly and rapidly spread from member profiles and news page to member profile. The next one is support. How do you get your customers to self-support each other? So getting them the ability to ask their own questions and respond back to each other. And finally, the most difficult one, most companies you probably have to done listening and talking in order to get to this and some supporting, is embracing. And what we mean by embracing it is using these tools and technologies to work collaboratively with your customers to build next generation products and services. So this means that communities transact through the entire product and customer life cycle throughout your entire organization. That's a very big corporate change. So let's take an example of how these can be actually deployed based upon these objectives. So the listening one is the first row on the top. And what you could do is you could test out new product ideas, or you could have beta tests, and then you can launch what we call insight communities. So you can understand what do they think about your product. Do they enjoy the marketing messages, or were they willing to repeat it? Did it resonate with them? Did it meet their actual needs? You can scan and monitor in these tools. Lots of vendors provide social media measurement tools, buzz monitoring, and even sentiment tracking and analysis, although that is still very nascent. Now the next one is talking and speaking, is creating an emotional attachment with people. Often advertising, traditional advertising, or even videos or blog posts within a community can achieve these, and these are often interactive marketing campaigns, advertisements, or social media marketing campaigns. The third one is exciting them, using energizing as an objective. So widgets, applications can quickly spread from profile to profile. Just to give you an example, if you downloaded a graffiti application in Facebook, and, well, you don't actually have to download it nowadays, but you interacted with it, it would often trigger a notification to your network, your friends per se, and they can see that you started to use this particular application, and they will see that you may be talking or drawing about the particular interest of yours. So these things will spread, word of mouth. The next one is supporting. Companies like Awareness and others are great for getting your customers to self-support each other, so they can ask questions and answer it for each other. Often the advanced ones have reputation points, so that your customers can and your members within the community can assign each other reputation points that enable to see who has the most credibility within a community. And we found that this is called social currency, is one of the most effective ways to reward helpful members, far more than paying them with giving them prizes or gifts. They want to be recognized in public. So this is a tactic built around that. And finally, we're seeing just a few companies use embracing technologies such as Dell using IdeaStorm, Starbucks called My Starbucks Ideas, and Nokia with the Engage community. And essentially, these community members can submit ideas for new products or services and then vote on them as a group. And the companies realize this is a way to increase the efficiencies and reduce costs for R&D research. So best practices around objectives. Pick one objective. Develop a plan around that one objective. And then pick the right success metrics based on that. Now, I'm often hearing from clients, we want to do listening, talking, energizing, supporting, and embracing. Well, you may have the right amount of resources to do that, but we encourage you to be successful by picking one of those, mastering it, and then layering other ones on top of it. The second thing is, think about your user community. Imagine walking into a real store. So let's take Starbucks, for example, and they're trying to do listening, talking, energizing, supporting, embracing, all at the same time for customers. It would be absolutely overwhelming, the amount of marketing and questions that are being asked of you. Pick one, make it clear to the community this is what you need them to do. Don't overwhelm them. All right, so let's take a look at the next section here. So let's talk about preparing your business. Now, I'm often asked, what does it take to have a successful community? Well, it's only 20% technology. The other 80% is process, strategy, services, and the roles needed for success. Launching a successful community within a corporation or with your clients requires you to make some pretty big functional changes within the organization. I recently did a report called The Best and Worst of Social Network Marketing, and I found that out of the 16 companies that we looked in depth at, that a majority of them did not participate in their own communities. They were not set up with the right roles in order to make this successful. So this is something to think about. All right. Get the cursor here. Okay. So preparing your business for a new community is much like launching a new product. So think of your online community as launching a brand new service or product. You actually need all the same roles and processes to get going. So you need the new headcount, and we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to show you some examples. New processes. This is something very unusual. You're breaking down the corporate communications walls where you're having other people in the company talk directly to customers online. You have new plans, new budgets, and what's not listed is new metrics and attributes needed for success. Your measurement changes. often people don't anticipate what the actual costs are. The real costs are not the vendor that you're going to buy, like awareness or the other folks in the space. There's quite a few. But the hidden costs are the soft costs. How much is it going to cost your internal people to manage, monitor, do reporting, analysis, people ready to respond during the night? How about during the weekends or holidays? So also the labor that requires this to kickstart it. You have to create media and editorial content in order to get this running. Internal education is needed. You need to teach teams. I had to do this. I had to evangelize within Hitachi to make this happen. And then the ongoing management, community management to keep this running. So I encourage you to develop an ROI model, list out all of the costs on a left column, including a lot of these soft labor costs, as well as the technology tools that are needed to do this, and also the redesigning if you create your own, or working with an agency if you're going to go deploy on other third-party sites as well. And then put all the benefits on the right side. Leads generated, SEO, people moving around the marketing funnel, reduction in support costs, and actually develop an ROI cost model before you get started. So I did a report on that called Online Community Best Practices. Feel free to check that out on the Forrester site. The next step is to build an internal team. So I was this role as part educator, part evangelist, but all customer advocate. So the key to getting people on board of your community program within your company or at your client is to use the C word over and over and over. Customer, customer, customer. Talk about how you're going to help customers connect or how the company is going to improve the relationship with customers. So focus on the tangible benefits to the company, and that's when you pull out that ROI sheet that we were talking about in the last slide. You can actually put these things together. Undoubtedly, there's going to be somebody in the company, maybe finance or legal or the COO, the CTO, or even the CMO is going to ask, well, why do we do this? Show me the business benefit. You need to be able to demonstrate on paper what it's going to look like. Develop those internal training sessions. Call in experts, third-party speakers. Have brown bag meetings. Get people educated and socialize the ideas. I have to encourage my clients to set up an internal community and just kind of trial it out first and see how that goes. One way to get things done, and this will help you in your career in general, is when you want something, one trick is to work with each individual stakeholder one at a time rather than bring all of them to the table. Aside from schedules, you can address each of their concerns separately and show them what's in it for them. And when you think about it, online communities impact almost all departments within the company, so they're all going to have individual concerns. Try to address those separately. This will break down the barriers a little bit at a time. You're going to need an executive sponsor in order to be successful, and they're saying the C word all of the time. So often it's the CMO or VP of marketing, but it could be somebody who's in charge of customer support or maybe even the product management team. This person needs to become your advocate and your defender, and probably giving you some budgets, as you talk to other internal stakeholders. So you'll need to wave this person in front of you to be successful, especially when you're at a much larger company. So let's talk about the roles needed internally. This is a social media strategist, Ed Turpinning, and he is the Vice President of Social Media at Wells Fargo. What a job. It's fantastic. Now, what is Ed really? He's actually an experienced business person. And the key difference with the social media strategist is that they're internal facing. They understand the business processes. They understand business programs, roles, objectives, and ultimately are responsible for the ROI of what's needed for an online community or any social media program. So he's a business person for sure. Ed is involved publicly as well, but he is the strategist and is overlooking as the final stakeholder. The second person that you're going to need to be successful is what we call a community manager, and I have this role. The community manager, unlike the strategist, is external facing. So they're an expert at using social media tools. They are going to be interfacing with customers all of the time, and they're fantastic at using conversational marketing, and they get along with people, and they're very responsive. So this is Lionel Menchaca. He's the digital media manager at Dell Corporation, and he was responsible for the blogs and is involved in the community and has become one of the public faces of the company, especially during very difficult times when they just started off. Now, next this is going back to getting your company organized, you're going to have to establish clear process lines within your company. We've talked about how all the different departments are affected. I encourage you to set up a mock simulation of both advocates and detractors. And what that means is people that love your brand and hate your brand in an internal community or a private community, and figure out how you're going to address these things. One of the worst things that you can do is launching your community and you see a flurry of negative complaints from real customers about your products, and your brand doesn't do anything. You sit there because you're paralyzed with internal commotion and people don't know how to respond or who's going to respond. So be prepared, actually do a fire drill ahead of time, and really be on top of the ball here. I encourage you to create internal guidelines, who's going to do what. I'm going to show you some detractor guidelines in a minute. And then lastly, create a rapid response team. And this team is responsible for really being empowered, that's the key word, to respond to things even if it's not in the process plan. They've gone through this training, they've done the mock simulations, they really understand how to do these things, and potentially they can make some mistakes, but in many cases, responding just to the fact that I've heard you to a detractor is enough to stall them so you can get to the right answers. So empower this team to at least be able to say, I heard you. Best practice. This is what I call the air traffic tower. And essentially the role of this tower, just like at the airport, is to monitor all of the things that are happening within your community. So there's three major roles of this tower. First of all, they're the radar dish. They're scanning what's being said within the community, whether it's on your own community or within Facebook or MySpace, and they're bringing this back to the right teams. Having everybody in the company scanning these things isn't going to make a lot of business sense. That's going to be a lot of wasted hours. The next role is they're a signal tower. So they triage what's important to the right teams. Hey, you may want to look at this. You may want to respond to this. They let each individual teams know who should respond and maybe provide best practices. Finally, after the responses have been completed, they have a flight log and they track what has happened, kind of like the CRM, Customer Relationship Management. And they're saying this particular detractor was handled in this way, or this advocate has been thanked in this particular way. It's a way to keep track, and then you can learn based upon your experiences and continue to improve. That's the air traffic tower. Next, you're going to need a policy. So I'm still going through all of these internal things. Again, remember, it's 80% of this internal processes and services and only 20% technology. So you're going to need a community policy. Now, I like Dogsters. Now, they have a long version that you can kind of see, but when it comes down to it, they judge the behavior of the community based on three things. Now, if you don't know Dogster, by the way, it's a social network, a community for dog owners and their pets. When you look carefully, it's actually the dogs writing the blog posts themselves, or the owners masquerading as such. So very interesting. So how do they measure their policy? So if people are out of line, they see if they meet these three criteria. Be fun, friendly, and informational. So what they've done is they've focused on the positive aspects of what they want people to behave like, rather than the negative ones. Do not do this, do not do that, and do not behave this way. So focus on the actions and desires that you want out of the community and set that forth as the policy. You'll have to work with your legal team on doing that. I'm sure I can see people's heads shaking right now. Okay, so this is the scary one. This is where you're traditionally going to get a roadblock, and I'm going to show you how to get over that roadblock right now. So somebody in legal or finance or your marketing team is going to say, what if somebody says something negative about our product or our company? Well, what you do is you whip out this particular grid here. We say we have a plan. And the best way to get around risk is to have a risk aversion plan. And this is one of the options to do that. So on the left-hand column, what we've done is listed out the type of detractor, so somebody who has a negative opinion. The next column is why do they make trouble, how you can spot them, and then what you should do. Now, there's a column missing on the fifth one here that's not pointed out here, but that one should be who in our company responds, and that's something for you to do. That's an action item. So let's take a look at the rows. So there's a legitimate complainer. This is an actual customer that's actually having problems with your products or services. So you should resolve their problem, hopefully in public. The next one is a competitor. Today's business and marketing, well, you're watching on Twitter, I just talked about my competitor, Gartner. So competitors are very much going to be in the communities that we participate in, so you need to have a plan of exactly how you're going to respond to them. There's many different ways to do that. The next one is an engaged critic. Now, at first glance, they may look like a real troublemaker, but what's actually happening is they do like your products and services, they're unsatisfied. So you have to figure out how you can help them. One way is to find engaged critics and create a private community and let them work with your product teams or your service teams to actually make some serious recommendations. Don't push them away, pull them closer. The next one is a flamer. And this is somebody who wants to argue with people, and they're trying to get people to be in a hostile situation, and they get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So you need to refocus back to your public policy. And the job search was be fun, friendly, and informational. If they don't hold up to the guidelines, gently remind them that this is the bigger purpose of this community is to think of those things. And then finally, there's the troublemaker, aka troll. There's nothing you can do about them, except ignore them or remove them. There's a bunch of different technologies I'm seeing up here, but none of them truly will fix this problem. Some vendors have what's called a bozo feature or ignore feature, where troublemakers, they continue to try to cause problems, but nobody else can see what they're saying. They become invisible, and they don't get attention, and eventually they'll leave. The downside, of course, is they're often able to figure that out, and they can create other accounts. So this is a reality when it comes to communities, is that you're going to have troublemakers. But this is no different than real life. So what happens online also happens offline. Okay, so that was the first and the second pieces. We talked about your business goals and understanding that the communities themselves are in charge. Next, we spent a lot of time on getting your company ready internally, again, the 80-20 rule. Next, let's talk about the social media marketing strategy, actually putting this into practice. And we'll take questions in about 15 minutes, so get those ready. I encourage you to lean on the services of experienced vendors. In most cases, many of my clients are not prepared to do this. They haven't done it before. And frankly, I made a lot of mistakes when I tried it at Hitachi. There was a lot of errors that I made. So going back, it makes more sense to try to lean on somebody. Now, what should you be looking for? In my upcoming WAVE report, segmenting out community platform members, I break it on consultation, that's aka strategy consulting, the ability to do moderating. The second one should be community management, and then moderating. To set up an installation, rebranding your site, launching it, and then reporting. A lot of people forget about the first one and the last one, strategy consulting and analytics. Those are two key things that you really need to make sure that you have checkboxes next to these things, whether it's internally or working with a third-party vendor. Now, important, do not outsource your business strategy completely. So I taught you about the POST methodology earlier, about picking an objective. Do not outsource that. You need to maintain control over that because this is your business, and no third-party vendor is going to understand your business like you do. So let's talk about measurement. Success is not defined on page views alone. What traditionally marketers look at click-through rates or email opens with your email marketing or page views to a microsite. When it comes to community, that's not really one way to find out if something was successful. So let's go back to our objectives, and we're going to talk about 3 of them in examples. Each objective, you're going to measure those differently. So I'll give you some examples. So what are all the different attributes? It might be interaction, it might be word-of-mouth marketing, or it means so that content is spreading, or it might be that people are having more time spending answering questions, time on site. So I'm only going to provide 3 examples because we only have limited time. So the first one is, we're going back to those objectives, listening. How do you measure if your objective is listening? Well, what you can do is you can measure the amount of insight that you're gleaning. You can actually put on a Excel spreadsheet and track all those things that you're learning about your product that you didn't know before. Or maybe there's reinforcements about here's a weakness in our product or on our services. You can start tracking these things because your community is naturally and organically talking to themselves. This is also a way to look for detractors that are coming around. This can be an early warning sign, a canary in the coal mine. So looking out for potential problems with products. You better bet that if Dell knew that their laptop was going to explode in Japan before it did, they would have reissued the batteries so that wouldn't have happened and gone into a major mainstream mess. So some key things that you need to think about: you can improve your marketing messages by listening, and here's how you do it. Find out how people are actually talking within your communities, and what are the words, what are the phrases, what are the actual problems that they're having within the community, and then that should help you craft to improve how you're going to be talking back to them. Additionally, you should be keeping track of the influencers within your community. There's probably 1% or maybe up to 10% of people that influence a lot of other people within the community. They're the most active or the most vocal. Track those people and understand them. Okay, the next one. So we talked about listening. Now, how do you measure talking? And again, this is talking with your community. Well, as you're creating a marketing message, you want to measure how much of that was spread back out, so share of voice. So measure how many people have repeated that message, or how does it score within search engine results. There's a bunch of ways to do that. So you can look at the consumption of content, the number of page views, track backs, who's linked to it. You can sometimes get that information from community vendors. The interactions, who shared it, commented on it, or maybe ranked or rated it within a community. And then also look for the qualitative things. What did they say back in return? Just because they did say something doesn't mean they said something nice. I am seeing some brands now creating customized dashboards, and they're coming to me to take a review, look at them. The real key is don't focus so much on each of the specific attributes that you're doing, but also think about what is your goal, what is your objective. So there's a lot of movement around this. We're still in the very early days. Marketing dashboards are still a ways off from truly incorporating social media measurement. Okay, the third example is what we call energizing. So that's word of mouth. And that's applications or widgets that or within social networks, or maybe even within your own private branded community. So the key to measure word of mouth is we look at physics, what we call velocity. So velocity or speed, depending on how you want to define this, is the distance over time. How fast did a widget travel over a week? So how many places did it get embedded within a week? And you can track that from week to week to week, and over a month you can see what your acceleration method or your velocity method was of your particular word of mouth. I saw Federated Media yesterday launched an interesting tool that was starting to do some of these things, and they're working with a bunch of partners, and they call this, I think they call it acceleration or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways people term these particular ways to measure. So let's move on to the last piece here before we get into questions. Best practices for engaging customers. Remember that community is another word for customer. So as you're creating these communities, you're basically building virtual stores or storefronts where your customers are. Or in some cases, you might be out there joining them where they exist. Some companies, like recently Intuit, they have the QuickBooks product. They're starting to integrate community right within their product and their customer lifecycle. So if you use QuickBooks, you can now see the community is part of the actual software experience now. You can ask questions and see responses from your peers in real time. So really savvy marketers and people that launch communities are going to benefit from word-of-mouth marketing. That means that they're going to let the community really drive this forward for them. So, for example, Legos, Jake McKee was there. He was the community manager. He let the community dictate exactly what types of products they were going to create. So they put them in charge. They empowered them to lead this forward. So let's take a look at a very advanced model. This is an end goal for you to think about. And this is what we call applying a social media strategy or computing strategy to your entire product lifecycle. So starting on the left, this is based upon the product life cycle. And if you look on the y-axis, you can see the activity, how many people are involved with it. So I'm going to show you a case study in a minute and exactly how this works. So on the left side, you can see this listening. This is before you launch the product. Listening to the marketplace, and we talked about that. Understanding what are your customers' needs within the communities. The next one is actually having a conversation with them and talking with them. And this is seeding and getting the market ready for the announcement. Now finally, that red exclamation mark is the announcement. That's when the press release goes and the product starts to hit to the shelves, whether it's a consumer product or a B2B enterprise product. Next, you continue these particular discussions within your community. You can have discussion boards, forums, Q&A, video. There's many different tools you can use. And then you start to see customers purchasing these products, and we're moving towards the hump there, which is called customer growth. Customers and product teams are working together. So online communities are great for customers to self-support, talking about installing their product or using it in their lifestyle. These things can continue to move on towards the right-hand area is using this what we call embracing. So while your community is there and being active, why don't you ask them how the product can be improved so you can repeat the cycle back over again. So the real crux of this slide is community, aka in other words the customers, can be involved in this ongoing dialogue with each other and with your company or your client in order to build better products and services. So let's take a look at a case study. This is an older one. I mean, it's 2006. It's old. So I was watching this carefully, and I saw a really interesting thing happen. So Microsoft was launching this quote-unquote origami product. It's actually a tablet PC. It actually didn't do that well, the product itself, but the way they marketed it was pretty novel. So they integrated social media within the entire product launch and then thereafter. This is for the ultra-mobile PC. Let's take a look. So we all know Robert Scoble, and at the time he was working for Microsoft, and he was called one of the evangelists. And what he was doing, and I showed you in that graph earlier, is he was seeding the market and exciting the market, hyping the market by talking about origami. So he almost has sort of a poem here that just hits people. It's not an iPod killer. It's not a portable Xbox. What is it? And he says, go to this particular page to see some videos. So he was having this dialogue, which we call talking, which resulted in energizing. Lots of people started talking about it. So we saw there was a teaser video on a microsite that he pointed to, and hundreds of blogs were pointing to it, and what it was talking about, what this promise would be, but it never said what the actual project was going to be, and what the product particularly was going to, and what the actual release was going to be. Okay, so finally, they continued to buzz it, and finally the announcement came in the press release, and then Robert announced it on his blog. And what he did is he pointed to the community within Microsoft. And this particular community is a developer community called Channel 9. And what it is a place for the developers and the product teams within Microsoft to talk about their products behind the scenes in an unedited type of way. And the members could actually create profiles, talk amongst each other, discuss these things, and really share amongst each other. Now, the campaign was a little bit too successful, so this was a quote that came from Microsoft. Overall, the campaign was successful beyond our wildest expectations, and frankly, maybe a little too successful. When we came up with this idea a few months ago, it was intended to be a small grassroots effort to generate some interest in the product. Boy, did we do that. So we're going to wrap things up and get ready for some questions. My recommendations are to you when you're launching your community is to act more like a host at a party rather than a cop. We talked about your policy. If you want to ask them to behave in a way that you think is best, understanding what are their needs and trying to deliver to that first. Remember, the power is in the hands of the community. So when I see brands that are forcing their way into communities, those typically end up in my worst case scenario for my reports. And you can measure the backlash that happens. is a wasted effort. Put the needs of the members first, then followed by the marketing objectives. And the way that we look at that is the POST methodology again. I'll reiterate it. People, understand how to use these technologies first. Then pick the objective, develop your strategy. Those are all your things that you need that we talked about internally, as well as the tools and resources. And then finally pick the features and the technologies and the widgets that you need in order to be successful. And here's the 5 objectives again. These can all apply towards your communities. Listening, so understanding what are your customers saying. Talking, which is talking with them, spreading marketing messages. Energizing, encouraging word-of-mouth spread. Supporting, getting your customers to self-support each other. And then finally, embracing, which is getting your customers to work with your product teams to deliver next-generation products and services in a collaborative effort. So here's my contact information. I'm on Forrester's email there. I have a blog, and I'm also on Twitter. So shall we shift to questions, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great. We have a lot of questions, so I will try to we'll try to get through them as many as we can, and those that we don't, we'll try to get answers to you offline. So the first one we have is, can password-protected communities still have SEO benefits?
Password protected?
Probably private.
Not really. Unless the bots from Google or other search engines can crawl the pages, that's not going to be a reality very easily.
Okay. Then second question we have, do you think the corporations should officially engage their clients within their user groups, which are usually independent and grassroots by nature?
It depends on your objective. So there are some airlines out there that have built their own community, and it allows their customers and flyers to actually participate. And they're very active in responding back to them and helping them be the very best that they can as customers and the airline. Now, there's another community that's been created organically, and this particular airline chooses not to participate in that one because they're watching, and what they're doing is they're listening objective. They're learning exactly what is it that they're doing. And in some interesting cases is they found out how some of the airline flyers, their clients, are working the system to get free airline points. So they find out about these loopholes, and then they stop it. So it really depends on what is your objective. Ideally, in most cases, brands should be out there and at least monitoring what people are saying about their particular brand. But not in all cases will you be able to respond, and in some cases you may not want to respond to some particular individuals. It depends.
Are there any tools that you recommend to kind of locate the online conversations happening and to begin listening?
Yes. So let's be clear. There's 2 types of communities that I'm talking about. One is one that you create on your own, which is using vendors like Awareness, and there's quite a few others, or finding communities where they exist in social networks or even Yahoo groups or Google groups. Now, there's quite a few what we call social media measurement companies or brand monitoring companies, and Forrester has rated this space in 2006. And we rated Symphony and Nielsen Buzzmetrics as the highest when it comes to enterprise class brand monitoring. We are, however, doing this wave right now. Suresh Vittal is an analyst here, and there will be a new updated wave coming out in this coming Q4 quarter.
Okay. Is there a merit to deploying the POST methodology while using an existing social network rather than building your own?
The POST methodology is a framework that applies to regardless of you're building your own or you're joining an existing one. So it applies universally across all social media strategies. So it does not matter. Essentially, and when you're asking the P question as the people, you're asking how are these people using technologies, and ultimately you're going to find out where do they exist. And that could mean they're in existing communities or you're creating your own. So therefore, the POST methodology stands against join or build.
Okay. listening is a form of market research. How should listening coordinate efforts with market research departments?
That's great. In fact, many market research departments should begin the process of listening in social media. So let's be clear. Social media is not something that one particular group does. So I did point out some two key roles, but this is something that impacts your HR group, your recruiters, your sales teams, market research, support, product development. So everybody within the company is going to eventually be impacted by these roles, and I'm seeing it even within my own company. So market research teams, actually many of them have come to Forrester and asked us for help. They're starting to use some of these brand monitoring tools. They're actually the ones leading the post process to find out who the people are, the demographics, and how they're using these technologies. So long answer short, research and R&D should be embracing these tools as well as the social media teams within the company. The answer is and.
Okay. How would you suggest product collaboration and development within a community without tipping off competitors?
That is part of the rub here. So when you're building your communities in public, you're building your products in public and talking about R&D, this is ultimately in public going to be shared with your competitors. However, let's take Lego back, for example. What Lego did is they pulled in, I believe it was 4 to 8 of the really top Lego Mindstorm product users, and they pulled them into a private community that only they could see. And I'm pretty sure they gave them some guidelines on what they could say, potentially NDAs. And I know there's some auto manufacturers that are doing this as well. They're private communities where they can pull people in closer and have these conversations. Now, there's another type of vendor that's appeared, what I call insight community vendors, and they're assembling basically user groups within communities, fielding questions and talking about products, and then they disband the groups. So Communispace and Passenger are doing that as well.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Can agencies, or do you feel that agencies can begin to replace kind of corporate titles or VPs of social media?
It's going to depend on a case-per-case basis. So again, if this isn't a role-based thing, it's a topic that goes horizontally. Agencies as well as internal corporations are going to be using these tools. I really don't see a day, however, when the agency will run the entire social media strategy. Now, the reason is because social media is often about getting your customers to talk about the products and services behind the firewall, but moving them to the front. So you almost always have to involve your employees when it comes to social media. So the net takeaway here is all of the different groups that we talked about, all the departments, as well as your third-party agencies will be doing these tools. It's not an or, it's an and.
Okay. Social media scales very differently from mass marketing. Do you have any recommendations on managing expectations?
Again, focus in on the objectives. Now, let's be clear. I'm not here to advocate social media. Social media has a tremendous amount of problems and challenges. You could go to my blog and click on the challenges button, and I've written them all out on multiple posts. And one of them is that social media is about small, engaging interactions between small groups of people in most cases. It's very niche-y, or what we call long tail, versus mainstream mass buy of advertising or email marketing. You're reaching a lot of people very quickly. And this is an important thing to talk about right now. With the downturn in the economy, what are marketers going to do if their budgets are reduced? Are they going to go for the small, intimate groups of discussions, or are they going to go what they've traditionally done is lean on that 3 to 5% click-through rate on traditional things? It's yet to be determined, but likely many of them are going to lean on what they've traditionally known. So you need to measure exactly how you're going to benefit from social media. And in many cases, the measurement part is often harder than doing the social media campaign. So one of the biggest challenges is there hasn't been a clear study or a finding that demonstrates that interacting within communities always leads to a purchase within the marketing funnel. We cannot clearly say that they've always been moved down the marketing funnel by doing social media measurement. So that is still a challenge to do. You can infer that with a particular measurement, but I have yet to see a study that proves it.
Okay. How do you justify the cost of supporting an insight community against the smaller one-off costs of doing focus groups?
I haven't seen a report or research from Forrester that has compared those, but insight communities can be cheaper. So I'm going to take some guesses on what the prices would be. I'd guess 20 to 100K for the first year. Maybe, no, actually it's going to be higher. 100 to 200K, what I've seen some prices for the whole year, but you can create multiple insight communities, and they do a lot of labor pulling people in. So you could take those prices and compare them to how much a focus group would cost. But you also need to look at the breadth and the width of the amount of people that you can reach. With an online community, you can reach a lot more people. But then you have to question, is a particular user group a sample size strong enough? Large corporations, especially consumer packaged goods, are going to do both. So they'll be able to afford both of those things.
Okay. One person asked, many of our clients feel that social media isn't an appropriate vehicle to engage with customers. They still feel that it's too promotional. Are there white papers or research reports that you could recommend that show success across numerous industries?
So I understand the question is brands aren't sure how to use social media when it looks so organic and how to do it in a natural way.
Right.
Yeah, we have quite a few case studies within the Groundswell book that's written by Forrester and Harvard, and there's 50 examples. I was one of the early readers and gave some feedback on that. But essentially, there's quite a few case studies on Shell Israel's blog. He's interviewing people to do these things, and I have a few case studies on my blog, and those are available publicly. The key here is, and I talked about this in the presentation, is to really understand what are they talking about first, and then join the conversations and talk about the things that they're interested in first before you pitch your product. So it's just like when you're at a bar and you're trying to meet new people, you want to first listen to what they're saying, join the conversation, and then potentially ask that wonderful somebody what's their phone number.
Do you feel that there are good resources to find documentation on how people should determine their terms of use and permissions with respect to their interactive communities?
Yeah, great question. Most of these policies, and like the Dogster one, as I mentioned, are available in public. These are public policies. So IBM, Microsoft, Sun, I think HP has made these all available to big companies. So you can find these digital disclosure policy or blogging policies or community policies out there and learn how to mesh your own. So when I created mine at Hitachi, I modeled it after one of those companies and then brought it to legal saying this is industry best practice.
We're going to do about one or two more questions and then we'll wrap things up. Another question, how do you attract users to an insight community? The value prop for support communities seems pretty clear, but I don't fully understand how insight communities are positioned to bring in users to yield their insights.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sure. So basically, how do you attract users to an insight community? It seems that the value prop for support communities is clear, but this person just isn't really clear on how insight communities are positioned to bring in users to actually share.
Sometimes those insight vendors, they pay the users, so that's part of why the reason they're so expensive, so they incent them to come. Often there's people out there that just really want to provide feedback and talk to each other. Now, the trick here is, if you really want to be successful, find out what your customers are actually talking on existing communities or maybe within your own, and you join them, and then you can initiate discussions there. So it's not so much you need to incent them, you just need to find out where they are and then participate with them or figure out how to listen from them.
Okay, and the other question is you had mentioned earlier rebranding your site.
Yep.
What did you mean by that?
Okay. So there's two types of communities out there. There's the existing ones, which I call organic ones. Facebook, MySpace, Bebo, LinkedIn, High5, and there's a whole bunch of others in Asia and Europe. Now, there's another class of vendors, which I call community platforms. Some people call them white label social networks. And actually, this webinar today is sponsored by one. And essentially, this is build your own Facebook or build your own community where you can rebrand it any way you want. So I showed you earlier an example of Microsoft's Channel 9 one. So that's a rebranded community. They've made it to look any way that they want. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. That's great. I think that in lieu of keeping things to schedule, we will wrap things up. Jeremiah, thank you so much for your time today. And if anybody has questions, you should have my information from the event invite. You can reach me directly, and we'll try to get those answered. So, Jeremiah, thanks again. And the playback will be available on the Awareness website resources page tomorrow.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation. You may